in all its glory.
Best average time to pressure allowed. Now, when this stat was first read to me, I was like, what the hell does that even mean? Okay, so let me break it down because I looked it up. And so what it is, time to pressure, how long a QB stays clean before the defense forces pressure. It doesn't measure how often pressure happens. Okay, that is one key to note. It's just how long it takes to get there. I think that's an important distinction too. But Nebraska's offensive line graded out pretty well on PFF. And for those that don't know how PFF grades, essentially it's individual line grades based on, did you win your block? Did you lose your block? Did it result in a positive play? Did it result in a negative play? Sorry. Again, down in distance and stuff like that factor. But more often than not, it's a +2, -2 system, just like all of their other grading, essentially. And so it is showing that in a lot of cases. Now, this poses the question for us, and we'll ask this to y'all as well. What does that stat mean to you, Brian? Go ahead and just kind of give me your rundown. What does that stat kind of tell you?
Yeah, so this kind of like what I was saying before we jumped on was, I feel like between this stat, just talking with some people, reading a lot, I feel like Nebraska's line isn't as bad as we're probably leading out to be. I mean, there's definitely room for improvement, but a lot of it, I think, is not hitting a receiver when they're open. A lot of it's holding on to the ball too long. So that's part of it. But this tells you Nebraska they're giving Dylan time.
Yeah.
4 seconds to throw is insane.
Mm-hmm.
It's an insanely long time. Dylan's time to throw when not pressured is like 2.3 seconds. When pressured is like 3.85 or something like that. So that's why this is confusing to me in a way, because the average of no pressure versus pressure, I wish this was more in depth. It makes me think that maybe it's not as bad as what we're thinking. We gave up 5 sacks last week. One of them was a bad snap. We know that. I believe one other one, Dylan held onto the ball too long and admitted such.
Yeah.
And then another one, if I'm not mistaken, it technically did not fall by grades, like PFF grades. It did not fall on the offensive line. I don't know how they can deem that, but taking that into account, that would essentially put 2 sacks allowed by the offensive line. 3 were at the fault of the quarterback.
Yeah. So a few things, and like most things, like I mentioned before, this is any of these numbers come with a lot of nuance. Style matters, system matters. Play action RPOs, those slow down pass rushes, and we do a lot of those. Another thing too, Dylan is a quarterback that does go through his progressions a little bit, and so he does like to try to extend plays with his feet. But this does show, to an extent, and here's my thing about the line, because when thinking about thinking back to the Michigan State game last week, for me, it's like, I feel like maybe it's more so like when it rains, it pours with the offensive line. And what I mean by that is essentially what really pushed us to really hate the offensive line this past week was that sequence of events that happened that got us to 4th and 42. And there was already kind of a mounting frustration leading up to that moment at the fact the offense could not really string together. And so in one hand, maybe like our memory of what happened of the offensive line just on pure emotion and frustration was like the O-line right now.
100%.
Because in that moment, in that instance, when we were at our worst, in our biggest frustration point, it was on the O-line right there. And when it rained, it poured, because those were some bad. Now, over the course of a 4-quarter game, maybe we're letting the emotion kind of skew a little bit,
I remember, I take notes during the game on my phone. I'll be like, first half, offense, defense, special teams, and kind of a synopsis after each possession. And at that moment, when that possession happened, my note was, O-line fucking sucks. But you said, over the grand scheme of the game.
Yeah, I don't tweet negative stuff. Like I try my best to not. And I said, the meanest thing I've said all season about any unit on this team is on Twitter is, I said, I'm about to crash out about this offensive line when that happened. And so I think that stuck out of my head, just that frustrating moment and the amount of everything just coming to a head at that moment. And I think that was our recollection. But then that doesn't account for what they did later on in that game. And so to give myself a little bit of accountability, I probably was a little bit too hard on the offensive line as well, because I let emotion cloud my judgment a little bit. But that's why we have the show. We step back and we take a look at it. And that's why I liked you giving me the stat, because it made me think through it. Because to anybody listening, like, he dropped this stat a minute before the show started. And I was like, hold on, I'm going to look up what this stat means, and we're going to talk through it on the show. So this is something that just kind of like we wanted to kind of talk through with y'all. But yeah, I'm curious to hear the chat's take on that, because me and you have been Donovan Raiola apologists for a long time.
Oh yeah. I think I called for his firing on Saturday, which I'm like, that's why I think we balance each other out a little bit, because after a game, I am very high or I'm very low. Yeah. And then my demeanor between Saturday and Tuesday is like a completely different script, because I'm riding high on emotion. I'm like, I just got out of the fight and I'm pissed, or we just beat Michigan if we did. Like, I would have ignored all the issues we had that game. But this is why I like to rewatch games too, like after the fact, because that gives me more perspective. And when I call for something stupid like what I did on Saturday, I can come back and revisit and be like, you know what? I'm an idiot.
And it's not necessarily stupid. It's just the fact of the matter of, like, that's how these games work. When you watch on TV, we're watching play results. You're not watching like film where you're like, okay, what's the line? Well, or what's the what's the defense alignment? What's the offensive alignment? How is the defensive line lined over with the offensive line? Like those little details. Like, that's the stuff you can go back and watch. Like, you can watch each individual matchup on the offensive line as opposed to just seeing play results. The frustrating part to me is when people won't admit that, like, okay, I was wrong, and or whatever they saw on TV, that is what it is, and everybody else who disagrees is wrong. And on X, I've been seeing the conversation this week, and then it's leaving out all nuance. Like, it's either like, and this is the Twitter dynamic, it's like, Husker fans, you're either always talking good about the team or you're on our shit list, and then the other people, you're apologists and you give credit for everything that they do no matter what, and all you are is glass half full. And like, trying to be in the middle is hell. Trying to be in the middle of this is hellacious, because nobody's trying to have that middle ground. And that's what people don't understand. Like, the show is, as soon as you have any critique, it's negative. Not everything's perfect. When Matt Rule steps up to the press conference, he doesn't go up there and say, yeah, everything looked great out there. He's like, listen, we fought hard, we battled, and we pulled out a win. And it wasn't, he'll even admit more often than not, you hear him say it wasn't pretty at times, Yep. So he can go out there and say that. But like, I think this is the problem I have when talking through stuff like this. It's like, okay, like, maybe the offensive line isn't as bad. Maybe emotion got to us a little bit. And maybe, Dylan Raiola is the prodigal son, but maybe we can give him a little bit of like, all right, let's just hurry up this processing, just a touch, because you do see, it is interesting to me that, I watched Julian Sayin play, and I feel like Julian Sayin's very, very, very quick with his decisions. And I feel like he's, and again, different offensive systems, this offensive coordinator, different talent around them, all that. I understand all that. But like, I feel like Dylan, as a 5-star, he should be kind of processing those things like to that level. And this is no knock on Dylan. He's an excellent quarterback, great quarterback. He is still a young quarterback. Again, I hate that I have to preface this every time, but it's just a thought that comes through my head. It's like, you see some of these quarterbacks and they're just going, bloop, 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 lighting it up, doom, 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 like for 4 quarters. And just, I want to see that for 4 quarters.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Julian Sayin, because I was watching some of the Ohio State game, and I feel like as I was watching it, I noticed he is more willing to throw into a tight window with confidence than Dylan. Yes. And I was making that comparison just to myself, just watching it. Was he had a ball deep down the sideline, tight window, safety over the top, dropped it in a bucket, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know if Dylan makes that. Yeah. Because I feel like he's more, I want to find the most open player who can make a play, as opposed to like, this is a tight window and I got to have it. Like, other than a few throws, like that one to Dane Key against Houston Christian or whoever was on the sideline of the end zone, like that was a tight window. But I feel like Julian Sayin in this case does it consistently.
Yeah, and again, they could be simplifying his reads, but from what I know about Ohio State quarterbacks is they put it all in their quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
That's what CJ Stroud said helped him. That's what he said when he got to the NFL. His rookie season, when he lit it up, he said the NFL was easier to him than when he was at Ohio State because of how much Ohio State put on him. And I think it's just, do you think just Dylan sometimes just puts a little too much pressure on himself to make something happen?
I think he has a lot of pressure in general, and then his own standards, his own expectations are definitely adding to that. And it is a lot to put on a kid his age. I mean, how many people are going to their dad's alma mater where their dad's name's on the stadium and the program's been in disarray for 20 years and you're kind of in charge with building this program back up and going through all this, the process of going 5-7 in year one to 7-5 your first year. And now everyone's like, it's year 3 of rule. We got to win 10, 11 games because that's what he does. And it's so much pressure on him.
And not only that, just the constant flack he gets comparison to Mahomes and all that stuff. It's just, there's a lot. And I'm not saying it's the moment's too big for him. Obviously, this team's a 4-1 team right now. But I think we're just saying, it would be nice to see that put together for 4 quarters of a game against a team like a Maryland, a good team, a pretty good team. And then that way we have confidence going against a team like, a Penn State, what hurts me the most, just as off topic, we'll go back, but is the fact that now there's a potential that we're going to play a top 10 talent level team in Penn State on the road in Happy Valley and have the potential of them being unranked when we play them.
Gosh, that's so frustrating, isn't it?
That hurts really bad.
I haven't looked at their schedule, but it is. I know I believe they play Ohio State. They play at Iowa, I think, this week at night, which is always kind of a weird situation, night games in Iowa City. And then I believe they had one more tough game. One of the guys I work with is a Penn State fan, so we're talking about it. But it's entirely possible that we're going into Happy Valley, and they're a 3-4 loss team. They don't look good. I mean, maybe it was the long flight across the country. I don't know, but that was pretty concerning
to lose. There's no excuse to lose to that UCLA team.
I mean, they put it on too.
Oh yeah, it was ugly. Let's see. Mackay had a good game. Kickoff recovery, 11 yards on one flipping carry. Exactly. Get that man the ball. What's up? Never mind me. Appreciate you hopping in here. Let's get down to brass tacks. Is Donovan Raiola one of the top 25 O-line coaches in the Power 2? I don't think there is over 20.
Well, there's like 27, 28.
So yes, in that case, Donovan needs to get it together or get out. That O-line should have been embarrassed mercilessly in film study this week. And another thing I will say too, PFF grades, the reason why I specified that, because when people post PFF grades and look at our offensive line grades, well, that grades them as individuals, not units too. So again, as an offensive line is a unit. All right. So
they have those grades for anyone curious.
Yeah. I kind of sometimes I hate that PFF grades are public to everybody. I wish you had to pass some kind of college football IQ test, to be able to look at them. So you can't just screenshot them and post them to Twitter as your argument, because holy cow, there's so much that goes into those numbers. I'll count that as we talked about we talked about how dumb their quarterback rankings were because we beat Purdue and then their Purdue's quarterback was number 1 in the PFF quarterback rankings.
And a game in which they scored 0 points.
When they got shut out, but he was making the best throw available because there wasn't a lot of throws to be made.